Hello, this is Unexplained America, and I'm your host, Lisa. Thank you for joining me this week. And specifically, this episode will come out on Friday the 13th, March 13th. A little business, please leave a rating, follow the new Facebook business page, subscribe, follow, leave a comment. All these things greatly help the podcast, so I appreciate it. Also, I'm super excited to say that the live show that I've been planning is going to be at the historic Ritz Theater in Malvern on Saturday, July 11th, kind of times to be determined. So stay tuned for the promotion, the ticket purchasing link that will be coming out very soon. This will be a joint live show with my friends at Cryptids Across the Atlas. So we will be discussing at the live show every unexplained thing that you guys love. They're going to talk cryptids. I'm going to talk about a true crime story to be determined and hauntings of the area, specifically to the historic theater. So stay tuned. I'm so excited. If you've not been to Malvern, I haven't either, so we can all just hang out in Malvern for the first time ever and go to an awesome venue. So I really wanted to do something that ties in with Friday the 13th, because you guys know I love Friday the 13th. Go listen to my February special Friday the 13th episode. I just talk about where Friday the 13th came from, kind of the lore, stories, a little bit about obviously the movie, which really solidifies Friday the 13th. Well, this whole thing that I'm talking about today does also solidify Friday the 13th, but definitely in the movie specifically, but not in a good light for sure. And really, I was just Googling. I came across this case. I've never heard of it myself, but I'll just say listener discretion. This is a brutal crime case, but also there is dealing with mental health issues and someone, unaliving themselves. So please heed warning to that, trigger warnings or whatever. But this is horrific. I'm sorry to say. So we're going to get started now. On Monday, October 24th of 1988, in the small town of Greenfield, Massachusetts, 18-year-old Sharon Gregory was home alone when a young man comes into her home and brutally stabs and kills her. This young man is allegedly living out the film Friday the 13th, and he is playing the role of Jason Voorhees himself. Before we get into that whole day, we're going to talk about Sharon. Now, Sharon is born to Edward P. and Barbara A. Gregory. Now, she was born on March 26th of 1970, and she wasn't alone when she was born. She was an identical twin, and I think that's so cool. Her sister Cheryl came along with her, giving Edward and Barbara two little girls right on the same day. Just, again, I don't know why, but I have a fascination with twins and identical twins. It's just so fun. That would be fun to be one, maybe. I don't know. You tell me. But I thought, oh, that would be fun to have twins and adorable and dress them the same and have like kind of alliteration with their names. Now Cheryl and Sharon, they weren't spelt anything alike. They didn't do that, but they sound alike and they go together. So that's so cute. Now the girls grow up their whole life in Greenfield. From what I can see, Barbara had lived in Greenfield herself almost her entire life. And a little side note about Greenfield. So I I don't even think, have I been to Massachusetts? I definitely need to go to Massachusetts. That's one state I've not been to. But Greenfield is located in the northwest section of the state, very close to the Vermont state line. And the population of Greenfield at the time that this happened was about 18,000, a little over. And now the population is actually decreased and it's about 17,000. Now, this is the county seat for the state. The county is Franklin County. It's a very old town, a very quaint. At this time, it was small and safe. Everybody knew each other, like everybody. I live in a town of, I think we have 24,000, and it's very, I don't know, it's got all the things, but it feels very small town, like you definitely know everybody in town. Now, this town is incorporated in the 1700s, but the area was settled in the 1600s. So very kind of like the colonies, the eastern side of the United States. It's just very old, very beautiful old buildings, like a lot of just quaint old architecture in town. So just really an old area. Sharon, she goes to Greenfield Public Schools, her and Cheryl do. She had literally just graduated in May of 88, so just a few months before this happened. And she graduated from Greenfield High School. When she was a sophomore, she had been a member of the Flag Corps, and I don't know what that means. If anybody knows what that means, message me. I was wondering if it's like like the flag line, like with the band, or is this like more like the flags that like the ROTC people do? I don't know. I didn't understand what that meant. But her junior year, she was in the Distribution of Education Club of America, and she was also kind of the whole time participated in the school's peer education counseling program and was a staff member on the school paper called The Exponent. Now, while in high school, she worked part time in the food services division of the Franklin Medical Center right there in Greenfield. So she was a very busy girl. She was a pretty girl. She had a lot of friends. And again, very small town. Uh, After this happens, the high school principal he chimes in about Sharon and just mentions how he didn't know her very well, but what that meant was that she was a very good student and very, since he didn't know her very well, that she was very studious and good. And she did graduate with like a college prep diploma. So she was intelligent and just ready to go on to her next steps, which she does. So at the time in October, so she is currently attending the Greenfield Community College, literally right there in town. She was living at home. She was working as a nurse's aide at the Charlene, I think it's called Charlene Manor Nursing Home. She had, again, lots of friends. Cheryl and her, they all knew each other. Of course, she had Cheryl. And then she had a boyfriend named Chris Theron, who he was actually still in high school. I don't know if he was a senior or junior, but he was still in high school. Now, on that Monday morning, Sharon's parents, they go to work. Cheryl leaves for school. And not sure, but I'm pretty sure she was going to the same college, like Greenfield Community College there. Now, Cheryl will say she sees Sharon getting out of the shower, like coming out of the bathroom, says bye to her, and then Cheryl leaves the house at 8:45 a.m. that morning. And she just walks out the door. Like she leaves the house unlocked. Again, super safe town, 1988, just that hometown feel. Like no one thought about murder, no one thought about anyone coming into their home. Just yeah, just very safe. So she didn't lock up. She just left. Now, Cheryl arrives back at the house around 12:30, and she goes in, she goes upstairs, and she finds a horrifying scene. This would have I can't even imagine. Her sister Sharon, her identical twin, is lying in the bathroom floor upstairs and appears to be dead. She's in a pool of blood. Cheryl doesn't know what to think. Cheryl calls 911, and a neighbor will state to the police when the ambulance arrived to the house, Cheryl is out on the front stoop, just sitting there. She is crying. And the neighbor comes over and is comforting Cheryl. And Cheryl says, I think my sister killed herself. Now, obviously, this just shows you how far removed this situation is from thinking murder and how safe this town is. Like Cheryl, it doesn't even cross Cheryl's mind that her sister would be murdered. Now, obviously, Cheryl couldn't see what had happened, but this initial statement spreads through the whole town. It spreads through everyone. So everyone at this point, that's all they know. And across town, a friend of the twins, a Scott Landry, he hears from his mother that one of the twins, didn't know which, had killed themselves. So this is what is spreading through town very early, very initially at first. Now the police and ambulance, they find the scene. They immediately know young little Sharon has passed away and that this is a crime scene. So a Captain Joseph LaChance, he is called in. He is with the Greenfield Police. He's called to the scene. He has 20 years on the job. And again, this is very shocking in this town. It just doesn't see much crime, especially much crime like this. Now, he arrives at Sharon's house along with a staff sergeant, Norman Roberts, with the Massachusetts State Police. So the city police are called, and then the state police are called. Everyone's called. And the medical examiner, a Dr. Thomas Smith, he arrives as well. So all of them go to the scene. They go upstairs. They find Sharon. She is fully clothed. She's lying in the bathroom upstairs. They can see she has multiple stab wounds in her back and head. They also note her throat is slashed. There is a pool of blood in the bathroom and then also blood in the hallway and some blood found on the stairs. So there's blood everywhere. There is not a weapon at the scene. There is a shoe print left in the blood in the bathroom floor. Now, a detective, Peter Clark, he is on the scene also, and he starts to visit with Cheryl. She tells him about seeing Sharon that morning, and then she tells him that Sharon had been concerned about a certain person, a person named Mark, who was kind of the friends of a friend. Now, Cheryl couldn't remember Mark's last name. She said he was a friend of their friend Scott Landry. Remember Scott? And that Mark scared Sharon, because when she was around him, he just stared at her, like intensely stared, made her feel really weirded out. He was creepy. Now, she said she didn't know, again, his last name, but she did know his address, and she leads the detectives to his home on Meadow Lane, which was about 3 miles from where the Gregorys lived. Now, Detective Clark and then a trooper Crossman, who's with the state police, they go to the home of Mark Branch. Now, his name is Mark Branch. He's not home, but his mom lets them know that what he drives, because they're asking, what does Mark drive? She says he drives a gray Chevrolet Chevette. It's 2 doors and it's a 1983. And that at that time, she states that he's at an appointment with a counselor at the Massachusetts Rehab Commission. Now, the police, this is not their first time visiting the Branches. They are familiar with the Branches. Mark has been implicated in some other trouble, specifically like a year before this happened, and we'll talk about that. Now, at this same time, the police are talking to all the neighbors and friends. They are scouring everybody. They're talking to everybody. At 5:30 on the 24th, the police go to talk to Scott Landry. In fact, Scott and his dad, they go down to the Greenfield Police Department to give their statements, to just talk. Now, Scott identifies Mark as a close friend. Scott states he had known Mark since he was like in 3rd or 4th grade. They go way back. They didn't actually go to the same school, though, because Mark attended a school for troubled kids when they were growing up, and he actually would graduate from this school. And Scott stated Mark's mom had told Scott that Mark had tried to commit suicide in the past. Mark does graduate from the Northampton Center for Children and Family Services, and the police will later confirm this. Now, growing up, Scott shared that Mark was troubled. He was made fun of. Not everybody got along with Mark. He kind of had a hard time with some of the kids in the past. Now, on that day, on the 24th, and this is a Monday, Scott had actually spent like the whole morning with Mark. He was with him between 8:15 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. He had picked up Mark at Mark's house to drive Mark to his appointment at the rehab center. He noticed Mark's car was at his house, but Mark didn't offer to drive. All he said was he didn't have gas, and he also had a broken AC, like a window unit in his car, needing attention, needing fixed. So Scott drives. He waits on Mark during Mark's appointment. Then after the appointment, they go back to Mark's house and they get the AC unit out of Mark's car. They load it into Scott's car to take it to Scott's house. Evidently, him and his dad were going to tinker on it or whatever. They are hanging out at Scott's house. They are watching MTV. And around 10:07, like a little after 10, Sharon Gregory, she calls Scott, and she's upset. Like, she's crying. She's talking about how she cannot get a hold of her boyfriend, Chris. Like, he's at school and he can't call her. And evidently she's needing help. And it sounds like from the interview that she needed help with like her car, like the car wouldn't start. Something was going on with the car and she couldn't get it started. So She's having car issues. So Scott advises her on how to try to start the car and then tells her if she cannot get the car to start to call him back, which she never does. So he just assumes that she's good to go. Scott gets off the phone. Mark's there. Mark's like, "Who is that?" And Scott says it's Sharon and tells Mark what's going on. And then Mark does ask, like, why she's not at school. And Scott is like, "I don't know why she's not at school." And again, I don't know why she wasn't at school. Now, maybe she didn't have a class or her class was canceled or whatever. Mark goes into Scott's parents' room and Scott hears Mark make a phone call. Like, he doesn't know to who, he doesn't know anything about it, but Mark makes a phone call and then Scott takes him home because Mark asks, or Mark just says, "Hey, I need to go home. I've got to go to work and pick up a payroll check that I hadn't picked up yet." Now, Scott drops Mark at his house. Scott goes back home and he takes a nap. His friend Peter Janst drops by at noon, and just FYI, Peter is the boyfriend to Cheryl. So as you can see, like, all these kids are connected, like small town, close connections, kind of everyone's friends with everyone kind of thing. But Peter is going out with Cheryl. Peter wakes up Scott, and then Scott's girlfriend comes by. Her name is Amy. She comes by his house at 12:30. So this is 12:30 p.m. Little after this, Scott's mom, she calls him and tells him one of the Gregory twins has committed suicide. And Scott is instantly upset. I mean, of course, he's shocked. He's absolutely shocked. He tries to track down Peter because he's like, "Oh my goodness, my friend Peter, his girlfriend," like, he doesn't know which one. He can't get a hold of him, but he gets a hold of Chris, Sharon's boyfriend. All of them, they go directly to the Gregory house. And then this is when they eventually find out the truth that what happened was Sharon was murdered. And of course, they're devastated. These are young teenagers, barely out of high school, all friends in this small, safe town. They are absolutely devastated. They cannot believe it. Their friend is dead and they're horrified. They're brokenhearted. They're just in shock. I can only imagine they're in shock. Now, the police ask Scott more about Mark, like trying to find out more about him, his relationship or possible connection to Sharon. Like, what's this about? Because, of course, all they know is that they had a conversation with Cheryl and she said Sharon was afraid of Mark. So they're trying to figure this out. Now, Scott tells the police that Mark had once wondered aloud, literally said these words out loud, "I wonder how it would feel to kill someone." He also told the police that Mark religiously watched horror films and other quote unquote smut. This attacks a little bit, doesn't it? You guys know how I like my horror films. Now, he states that Mark loved the Halloween movie, the Friday the 13th movies, like all of them that were out to that time in 1988. I do too, my favorite being Halloween. I do not watch these films religiously, but evidently Mark did. He was very into these films. He had purchased all kinds of masks, like the horror characters' mask, like the Jason mask and everything. He had combat boots, and Scott saying that Mark patterned his life specifically after Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, and Freddy Krueger. Like, these were his heroes. This is who he was infatuated with, kind of thing. Scott tells police that Mark told him that both twins, both Cheryl and Sharon allegedly mocked Mark. And he said literally like a week before this all happened that he was angry at them. So he had told Scott, "Yeah, I don't like them. I'm angry at them. They mock me. They make fun of me, whatever." Scott also tells police that Mark had all kinds of knives. Like, he had a knife collection. He was infatuated with knives, infatuated with horror movies, just filling in some blanks there for the police. The police, they talk to Amy, Scott's girlfriend, because she's also friends with all these people. She knows all these people, and she just confirms everything that Scott said about Mark as far as all of that goes. During Scott's interview, the police begin an interview at 6:25 p.m., and this is still on the 24th, and they meet with a neighbor of Sharon's, and his name is Michael Rockwell. He states at noon on the 24th, he hears like a car door slam, and he looks outside. He looks out the window towards the Gregory's home, and he sees a two-door gray Chevy at the Gregorys, and he sees a white male around 6 feet tall. He says 180 to 195 pounds, man, dark hair, wearing jeans and a jean jacket that were either stonewashed or acid dyed. This is very 80s. He's not wearing glasses. He's very clean cut. And Michael sees this man walk to the Gregory's door. That's what he sees. About 5 minutes or so later, he sees this man leave the house and get into the car. Then, about 30 minutes later, he sees Cheryl come home. And then right after that, he sees the cop show up. So he is kind of backing up the coming and going, being a very big witness to this whole situation. That evening, Dr. Thomas Smith, he performs the autopsy on Sharon, and he will state that Sharon received 24 or so stab wounds, and they were possibly made by a single-edged knife about 1 inch to 1.5 inches wide and 4 to 5 inches long. Now, nothing else is released about the autopsy. News, they put out an all points bulletin looking for Mark's vehicle. So the cops are looking, the town is looking. They don't state at this point anything more than that, other than they're looking for this gray two-door Chevrolet Chevette. Okay, this is happening, and this is on the night of the 24th. So all of this is just happening so quickly. By the morning, so about 8:20 a.m. on Tuesday, and this is now the 25th. So a woman named Diane Tuller, and she lives in Buckland, Massachusetts. So, and Buckland is about 14 miles to the west of Greenfield. Now, she calls into the police that she sees a gray Chevy Chevette with the license plate that they released and matching, and that she tells them where to find this car. Okay, so the police go to the location. They find the car. It's matching up with Mark's car. They do not see any sign of Mark, but they immediately begin searching all around the car. They're talking to all the people on the street, all the people around here, and of course they're looking for anything around the car. They're looking for Mark, they're looking for a weapon, they're looking for anything. And at this point they don't go into the car. So they're following correct protocol. This street that his car's found on is called Avery Road. They talked to a man named Francis Wilder. He says on the 24th, he left his house at around 11:45 a.m. and that car was not parked there. But when he came back, he arrived back home at 1:45 p.m. And this is on the 24th, and the car was there, and the car had been there ever since. Now, Francis, he didn't see anyone. He didn't see who parked it, because when he came home, the car was already there. Now, the police immediately, of course, they're searching all around the car. They're searching all of Buckland at this point and everywhere around, but they are working on search warrants. So two things. They're working on getting a search warrant for the gray Chevette and Mark's home. So they want to go in. There's probable cause going on. They've got this witness, next door neighbor. This is where we're going. Now the police bring Cheryl back in for more questioning, specifically about Mark. Okay, so now they know. They're getting kind of down to it. They want to hear more about Mark from Cheryl. Now, Cheryl tells the police that back in August, she was at Scott's house, and Mark was there too, and some other friends. And Mark evidently had a psychological assessment papers on himself, like about himself. Now, Cheryl, who was interested in psychology, she wanted to look at them. And Mark says yes. She asked Stephen take them with her. Like, can I take these home and go over them? He's like, fine, but burn them. So she takes them. This is in August. Now, fast forward on October 22nd, so literally 2 days before the event, she gets a phone call actually from Scott, who's with Mark, asking Sharon. So Scott calls Sharon. I guess maybe he's closer to Sharon. And he asked and maybe he couldn't get Cheryl, but he asked for the papers. Like, Mark is adamant that he wants the papers back. Well, she's like, Cheryl's not home. I don't know where the papers are, but I will look and get back to you. Okay. Like, I will get them back. Well, this is the 22nd, and that never happened in that 2-day time frame. Now, Cheryl says she had seen the papers in her room before the 24th. So she had found them. I guess she was planning on getting it back to Mark. Well, after this all happens on the 24th, she looks for those papers and they are gone. So she's insinuating that Mark came in, murdered Sharon and took back his psychological papers, is what she's alluding to. A little side note here, because this is confusing and this is going to come up at the very end. We're going to talk about some remarks by the chief of police, but it's very confusing about if these papers were like a psychology and analysis that allegedly Cheryl had done, because again, they did that peer counseling stuff. Some sources say that Cheryl, or no, that Sharon was going to school for psychology. And the only thing, she was at the Greenfield Community College, and they just said that she was going for, like a liberal arts degree at that point. So they're kind of I don't know the truth on that or where the papers came from, but there's kind of two different stories about the papers and if the papers were actually done by the twins or if the twins actually, like, which one was more interested in the papers. But according to Cheryl, she had the papers, so they were in her possession. Okay. Cheryl also tells the police about a year ago, before all this, Mark had told her a story about how he had kind of ordered all these really scary masks for Halloween. And this was Halloween of 1987. And he went dressed up, like he got dressed up as Jason Voorhees, and he goes to a middle school, like after school, kind of waiting around, and he scares a little girl. And she runs off, and he is chasing her. I can't even imagine how horrific this would be for this little girl, but he is chasing her, and luckily he trips and he falls while he's chasing her. And he said that if he hadn't, he would have stabbed her. Like, he stated this to Cheryl. Like, that was his plan, to not only scare this little girl on Halloween, but actually stab this little girl dressed up as Jason Voorhees. Like, how horrific is that? So Cheryl is discussing this, and the police are kind of familiar with this. This was one of those instances that they had been at the Branch's home because, they had kind of, yes, they were familiar with him. And there's not a whole lot. Evidently, there had been some other things in Mark's background, some other situations where he was making people uncomfortable or saying weird things or threatening things. But because he was underage at that time, they really didn't release any of these things to the public. So everything released was kind of alleged things that he had stated himself. Okay. On the afternoon of the 25th, the police, they have their search warrant for the Chevy. So they have the car towed to the Massachusetts State Police Department, to a nearby area called Shelbourne. Now, the car is analyzed, it's fully looked through, and it's looked over by actual chemists from the Massachusetts State Crime Lab. Now, obviously, back then in 88, they don't have what we would be searching for, but they would be searching for fingerprints. They would be going, specifically about blood. So the chemists find blood. There's visible blood, tons of blood inside the car, the steering wheel, the pedals, the shifter, the seat. Like, there is blood everywhere inside Mark's car. The police, they also have their warrant for Mark's home. So on the 25th, they're combing over the car that afternoon and night. They're combing through Mark's house as well. And in that search, they take 329 items. Now, these are various items. Most of these are horror movie tapes. He had tons of horror movies. He had movie poster. He had dolls. He had different paraphernalia, like fan things from movies. He had masks. They take all these things. They also take, of course, his shoes, boots, shirts. He had several plaid shirts they notated, and he was actually wearing a plaid shirt on the day of the murder, like underneath, I guess, his acid washed jean jacket. Now, and you can imagine a plaid shirt at that time, you're trying to have that look of Jason Voorhees, is what they're kind of alluding to. Now, the investigators state Mark's room looked like really the typical teenage bedroom, just typical, except for one thing. It was immaculate. They said it looked like a room, quote unquote, from the pages of Good Housekeeping. And this was Captain LaChance talking about this. And he went on to say his room was probably one of the neatest rooms you'd ever find. Everything was covered. Everything was put away. And this struck the investigators like this was very out of the ordinary. This person was tedious. Now, Mark's parents were Richard and Betty Branch. They had actually only lived in their home there on Meadow Lane for about a year and a half. And their street was said to be the prettiest in the whole town. Like, this was the affluent, quote unquote, part of Greenfield to live. Like, this is where they lived. I'm not sure if Betty worked. I couldn't find that, but Richard, he worked for the Vermont Yankee Nuclear Powers. They had actually kind of moved in to the area, and again, this part of Massachusetts very close to Vermont, but also there was like a location there close to them. And Mark has a brother named Richard, also named Richard after his dad, and then a sister named Karen. So they had look like 3 kids total. They will discuss and outline how they had been trying to get Mark help for over the last 15 years. He had been, of course, we discussed, he went to kind of a special school. So they had him in counseling, they had him in these schools. They knew he had they knew he was troubled. And she had mentioned how he had tried to commit suicide in the past, but they knew that he had this huge fascination with horror movies. They were aware of it. And again, they had been trying to get him help and working on him getting help for the last 15 years, which he's not very old. He had, in fact, we'll talk about this. He had just turned 19. So since the time that he was a toddler, guys. So that's very sad to me, and I do feel for the Branches, and there were a lot in the community that did. So now we discussed that Mark had a job, so he was working like a little part-time job. He worked at Stop and Shop, and it was just like sounds like a grocery store, but he was working in the produce. Now, he is expected to show up for work on Wednesday the 26th by 9 a.m. And he doesn't do this. He doesn't show up. No one has seen him. And again, they had already put out that bulletin for his car. They found his car. Well, after this, they put out a bulletin for Mark himself. I mean, this is a manhunt. And of course, they now have this description from the neighbor of Mark being at the Gregory's. They have the car full of blood. Like, they have plenty of probable cause Mark is a suspect. So they are putting it out there that he is a suspect and they need him. And by the 26th, they do get a warrant for his arrest. So this is a full manhunt. And this is huge news. Again, this is in an area where they don't see much crime, much less this heinous murder of a young girl and then this young man on the run. And these are people that the community knows. These are kids that are, running the same circles. And so, yeah, this is full on press. The press has ascended Greenfield. Yeah, they're trying to get interviews from everyone they can. And again, this is it's front page news. It's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. But the police are asking, obviously, everyone's help for locating him. Everybody's scared on top of it because they're letting them know that he's kind of armed and dangerous. Okay, he at least not with a gun, but with a knife. And obviously, he committed or allegedly, suspectedly committed a heinous crime. Now, the kids in town, they are just torn up. They love Sharon. They're mourning her. They're mourning for her family. And then Mark is well known and has friends as well. So it's absolutely shattering. It shattered this small town. Now, on Saturday, the Gregory family, they hold Sharon's funeral. 150 plus attend her funeral. And you can imagine the anguish of the whole town and her family and her poor twin Cheryl, her best friend, her sister. Again, just the suffering. Then on Monday, it's Halloween. So the town of Greenfield, the town of Buckland, the town of Buckland, they are absolutely scared. They have a fugitive amongst them. Like, the whole town's looking for this guy. So they kind of curtail Halloween. There's newspaper articles kind of talking about how the people are scared, and then it's kind of, they're upset because the kids who look forward to Halloween all year, well, they don't really want them trick-or-treating. And so they kind of curtail the trick-or-treating. They kind of say, okay, do it in daytime hours. No, kind of have a curfew going on for the town, like nobody out after dark, that kind of thing. So and again, there's a manhunt going on, and Mark is considered dangerous. So on Friday, kind of fast forward to Friday, November 4th, it's reported that on Tuesday, the 1st, someone had actually broken into a Buckland home, and all they took from this home, and there were jewelry available, other electronics, other valuable things available, but all they took was food, a hunting knife, and cold weather gear. Nothing else of value. So the authorities assume it's Mark. They just assume it's Mark. They're kind of, and again, they're tracking him. They're because they don't know. In fact, Police Chief David McCarthy, he states Mark has zero survival skills. Like he doesn't have these kind of skills. He wasn't one of these kids that his parents knew that he could survive. He wasn't a camping type kid. He didn't Boy Scout or anything like that. He did not have survival skills. And there had been an extremely cold nights. Now, this is an area of the country, of course, where I'm talking the average the whole year, if you look at it, is maybe in the 40s. So in the summer, the average is 70. It's going to get as cold as -30 in their winters, and at this point in October, the nights would have been really cold. They get on average about at that time 50 inches of snow a year. So they get a lot of cold weather, and they had some extremely cold nights. And he's stating to the newspapers that he can't see how Mark was still alive. Like he just couldn't see that he could survive. And they're putting out more details about Mark to the public. So they say Mark just turned 19. He bites his fingernails to the nub. He has short brown hair, green eyes, bushy eyebrows. He has a birthmark on the back of his neck and a scar on his knee. Now, his weight is closer to the 165, 175 range. And again, around 6 feet tall is what they're saying. Now, Chief McCarthy, he states that they are receiving 40 phone calls a day with leads on Mark sighting, but most of these calls are crank calls. He also discussed he didn't think anyone was harboring Mark, although it was possible, but he did say that there were a lot of young people in the community that were conflicted. They liked Mark. They were a tight-knit community, but he still didn't think that any would help Mark because a lot of them, although that they were conflicted, they were angry at Mark as well because, of course, they love Sharon. So just a lot. I mean, this is crazy to think about. But McCarthy also states there were absolutely no ritualistic or satanic anything to Sharon's murder. So there were so many rumors. You can imagine when the town doesn't know anything. Of course, the police are keeping everything pretty, in. To me, they're telling a whole lot, like things that they wouldn't tell now in the newspaper. But at that time, it's still like they don't know what happened, how it happened. So, you know what happens when people don't know anything, they make stuff up. And so a lot of people were talking about how it was a satanic situation or a cult or a cult. Yeah, and he's trying to be like, it has nothing to do with that. Now, we're kind of seeing that, situations like you still have poor Nancy Guthrie that's not been found. So again, you know how it goes. When we don't know what's going on, we will make stuff up. People in general, not me. On November 15th, a friend of both Sharon and Mark, they write into the newspaper with a letter titled Friend Caught in the Middle because there's so much being published. And this person, his name is Derek Iannelli, and he had actually dated Sharon, evidently, and still had very warm feelings for her. Like he really cared about her. And he was also a friend of Mark. So he writes into the paper, he has an article, he's discussing how he finds out about the murder on October 24th, which was his birthday. So he was like, this was horrible news for my birthday. And then he discusses the town rumors, gossip, paranoia about the awfulness of Sharon's funeral, like the sadness, how he felt total remorse for the Gregorys, but also out of respect for Mark, he did visit Mark's parents. And then I will just kind of read this very small. So he closes this article, Derek does, with Greenfield. Remember, Sharon was also our friend. The Mark branch that is out there is not the Mark branch that we know and loved. The Mark branch we know of would not have hurt all of us this way. And that's how he closed his letter. in the news. This whole time, of course, this was on the 15th. So, goodness, this is about 20. I mean, Mark's been gone for 20 days. Sharon's been gone for 20 days. This whole time, this whole community is terrorized. They're sad. They're frustrated. They're like, where is this guy? They're looking in neighboring states. They're doing flyover. They're doing everything. They had dogs out searching for Mark. Like again, they're doing everything they can to try to find him. And this kind of reminds me of that Devil in the Ozarks documentary guy. He was arrested, he was in prison, then he gets out, and just the terror of him being out the days that he was out. I think he was out for 2 weeks. So it's just terrible. It's frightening when there is someone on the loose and you don't know what they're going to do, where they are, all these things. Now, on Tuesday, November 29th, almost a month later, a 26-year-old Buckland man named Kevin Purinton finds the body of Mark. Now, Kevin, he is hunting. So he had taken off work actually on the 28th and 29th, and he went out on the 28th hunting. He hunts, and then he goes out again on the morning of the 29th at 6:30 in the morning, and he was actually tracking a deer he had shot, and he's tracking this onto some private land owned by the Cross family. Now, the Cross family, this is private land. They do not allow hunting on their land, and they have 30 acres, and it's very rural. It's kind of on this hilly mountainside situation. Well, he didn't shoot the deer on their land, but he's tracking it. So he continues to track this deer, and at first, he kind of he's looking into the distance, and he sees what he thinks is someone sitting on a hill. So he's like waving at this person. He's just waving. But as he gets closer, he sees that really it's a body hanging from a pine tree about 5.5 feet off the ground. And again, at a distance, it just looked like someone sitting on a hill, like with the hill in the background. Now, at first, and this is amazing how our mind work. He's getting close. He's like, this is a prank. Someone's pranking me. This is a dummy. This is a dummy that's just hanging. That's what his mind is doing. And it's your mind protects you. Now, Kevin, he states he just knew the whole time that he would find this man. So it's very interesting. He states to the paper that he thinks he's going to be the one to find this man because he's a hunter, and ever since he had heard about Mark being out, the manhunt had started. He had been trying to search for him right off the beginning, but he's like, I just felt like I was going to find him. But yet when he actually found him, he didn't even think it was a real person. So it's just very interesting that wasn't even a thought in his head. Well, Kevin has to, like, he's hunting. It's in rule. As soon as he sees this body, he has to go hike down, and he goes back to, I think it was his parents' house that lived close by, maybe a mile down the road. And he had to use their phone. He calls the Buckland police, and he's absolutely shook. He will state to the newspaper the next day, it was terrible. I'll never forget it. So the police come out. Mark's body, it does have, like, he has his wallet on him. They are able to identify his driver's license is in the wallet. Now, Mark had made a noose from a bootlace and tied it onto his belt, looping the leather strap around a tree limb. And Mark, he was wearing like a blue collared shirt. So he had actually put his collared shirt up to keep the bootlace from digging into his neck to make it more comfortable for himself. Now, Mark's watch and keyring were on the ground below his body. He was clothed in jeans, a light blue cotton shirt, which was not the shirt that he was wearing before, and black army-style boots. There were no blood on this shirt, and they did not say about the jeans or anything like that. It did say there was blood on his right knee, but they didn't know if that was maybe from the incident or if he had fallen and hurt himself. They didn't know about that. Now, the medical examiner, he shows up. He brings a body bag. They have to cut down the body, and Kevin and other men actually have to help the medical examiner carried the body off the mountain, which was he said was like a 15-minute trek. And by the way, the distance, I looked this up. So the distance between Avery Road, where the Chevette was left, and then this area close, like, of course, this is rural, but this area that Mark's body was found is close to a Clesson Brook Road, and this is like a mountainous area. These are 3.3 miles apart. That is it. Now, the police told Kevin that the way that Mark hung himself, and I don't know if they're trying to make Kevin feel better, because Kevin was pretty shook. He was very shook, if you can imagine. I can imagine. They state to Kevin that Mark hung himself, tying a noose around the neck and leaning in, and that it would not have been painful. He would have just been dizzy. He passes out, and then his body weight cuts off the air completely. So that's what they told Kevin, which he relays to the newspapers. Now, the police hold a press conference, so they're letting everyone know, that they have found Mark. So he's found on the 29th. By the 30th, it's being circulated to the whole community very quickly. And on the 29th, the police had gone immediately to Sharon's family, to Mark's family, before they did the press conference and stuff. There is shock, there is relief, there's sadness. When some people found out, they yelled triumphantly. Like, there was a lot of emotion. People felt for Mark's parents, but so many women especially were relieved. The women, they had been so afraid. The people of Buckland, Greenfield, like, people had started setting their alarms, carrying weapons, locking their doors since this had happened. So there was just a lot of fear throughout the community. Just the community was terrorized. And of course, friends of Sharon were jubilant. Like, again, they're relieved. And some friends of Mark stated that they couldn't believe he would kill himself and that they thought he was maybe killed. And this is quote unquote by Beverly hillbilly people, or made to do it by gunpoint by these hillbilly people. Yes, quote unquote. Now, they didn't know some, I guess, didn't know his background like Scott did. Now, many were absolutely upset that that there wouldn't be a trial. So that was the other thing. There won't be a trial. The town wouldn't get closure. The town wouldn't know what happened. Of course, the rumors were running crazy. And because the police, of course, at this point, they'd not been able to disclose anything about the situation. So the town knows nothing. And again, they were making stuff up. So it's just an awful, awful situation, awful closure to this, situation. But Mark is found. They do release that he died of suicide. His family does post an obituary in the newspaper about all that, asking, for prayer and such. And they have it looks like they have a private ceremony. Now, with Mark's death, the murder charge is dropped and Sharon's case is closed. Now, it looks like the newspaper there in town is called the Recorder. So the Recorder, and it looks like an attorney for the Recorder, or the actual head of the newspaper, they are requesting, they're petitioning the court and requesting for documents to be released to the press so that the town will know the evidence against Mark and it'll settle the confusion for the town. Now, Mark's family, they have an attorney. His name is Robert Carlson. So he's fighting for these documents to be sealed. He says sealed forever, to quote unquote protect Mark and the Gregorys, but really Mark's family, for privacy reasons. Now, the judge, he comes back and he states, and this happens December 8th. So you have, all this going on the 30th. So you have a week that this is just back and forth about, are these documents going to be released? Are we going to find out? Is the public going to have any knowledge of what's going on? Because there won't be a trial. Now, on Thursday, the 8th, the judge consents for the records to be released, that there's nothing lawful to keep them sealed, and the sealing of documents is not to protect the suspect or the privacy of the suspect's family, but the point of sealing documents is to give the suspect a fair trial, while they're building to the trial. Because obviously, once you get to trial, you get to know, quote unquote, all the information. But up to that point, they'd sealed the documents just to give a fair trial, not to protect that suspect or his family. Now, obviously, in this case, no trial, no release. So the documents are released. And of course, there's not tons of documents, but there is a full affidavit by the police listing all the information that, of course, we have gone through. But the Recorder, which is the Greenfield newspaper, on Friday, December 9th, they fully print the affidavit by the police. They list all the information about the timeline, the next door neighbor's witnesses. They discuss how Mark was angry at both of the twins. They talk about the neighbor witnessing Mark coming and going from the Gregory's home, his car. They release the information about the interior of Mark's car was covered in blood. So they release all of this so that now the people will know what happened. Now, after this all comes out, Chief of Police McCarthy, he is free, I guess, to talk to the police. So he tells the press, as far as I'm concerned, the bottom line motive was that Sharon Gregory had in her possession a psychological profile of Mark Branch, and that profile was wanted badly by Mark Branch. He didn't like her having it, and he wanted it. She did a profile on him, and she made it known to him what the profile was. He goes on to say Branch's particular interest in Jason, the maniacal murderer featured in the Friday the 13th horror films, was also part of the motive on October 24th. It's a motive that was more than one part made up of his being mentally unbalanced, a mental illness of some kind that was confirmed by his parents, but also his absolute fascination with horror movie villains. You culminate these things and you come up with murder. He was so entrenched with Jason that he had to have the final chapter in his own feelings. He wanted to know what it was like to live out the part of Jason. And they talk about art, or strike that. They discuss life imitating art. Now, that sounds very familiar to us. I know if you're into horror movies, of course, all of that was mentioned in the Scream movies. Yes. So this, of course, you guys know, I like horror movies. And I can't, this kind of ruins it for me a little, a little bit, this case. Strike that, strike that. Um, Obviously, I'm sure there's different debates on that. And obviously, this individual was influenced by what he saw, but there's violence everywhere in the news, in the Bible. So I don't necessarily think that watching a horror movie makes you a murderer or vice versa or whatever, but it's just sad that this case there was, obviously mental health issues, obsessive behaviors, just the fact. Look at his bedroom. That was very interesting to talk about. The police looking at his room and being like, "Yikes, this was yeah." They pointed out the tidiness, the neatness, just did not fit the situation that they normally see or whatever. So not that people can't be tidy, but yeah, to be that tedious or whatever. So obviously, poor Mark, his family, it's a whole sad situation. More so for me, for the Gregorys, Sharon is the true victim, and she's a beautiful young woman that did not deserve that. And a lot of people did think that perhaps, I mean, he knew he was going for Sharon, but they kind of felt like he really, it was kind of either or for him, that really Cheryl was the object of his anger as well, because really it was her that had the documents. Police McCarthy, I don't know why he made those statements and why there's very varying statements based on that, but the affidavit does talk about Cheryl. So I would go with that. So very, very sad case connected to horror movies. I did try to look to see, where the families were at this point, and I have no idea about the Branch family. It looks like everybody, it looks like Sharon's relatives and then Mark's relatives are all out there, and of course this happened 30 plus years ago, but everybody's out there living their lives, and it's interesting. I did find that the Gregorys still are in Greenfield. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with their friends and family, and they put it in the newspaper and published it and such. And that was in, I believe that was in 2018. So they would be actually closing in on their 60th wedding anniversary, which is amazing. But it looked like they still lived in the same home that they had lived in their whole life. So it's very interesting to me on that part. But yeah, so very sad case. Thank you guys for listening. Let me know if you know the case. Let me know how you feel about the case. Leave a comment. Yeah, all the things. So this kind of like for us horror movie watcher people, I'm like, oh, yikes. Leaves a bad taste in your mouth. But this is Friday the 13th when you're receiving this. So let me know if you watch any scary movies, okay? And thanks so much for listening. Bye.